Our first storyteller of the day is Diogo Lucas. You've already seen him in the keynote. And his favorite comic book is Watchmen, but he also loves drawing and sketching himself. Unfortunately, he's not going to do that on stage today. I don't know, we'll see. But today, he'll deep dive into something totally different, namely our technology radar. Please join me in welcoming Diogo on stage.
Hello, hello. Okay. Is it working now? Yeah. Okay. So, hello, folks. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for your patience about everything that happened yesterday. I'm bummed as well. I had serious drinking plans. It's not like I changed my plans, just that Peter wouldn't allow me to drink as much as I wanted. And more importantly, thank you so much for your feedback, because this talks about feedback that we collected from the community. What happened was, community reps reached out to us and said, hey, we want a talk in which Atlassians tell us what sort of technologies are interesting to start investing in, which sort of technology we should be sunsetting. When Peter reached out to me with that, I was quite excited. I had lots of ideas until I realized, perhaps people don't want my own very personal opinion. Crazy, I know. Perhaps they want to actually hear from Atlassian engineering, so what we did was we ran a tech radar just for you. In case you're wondering what the tech radar is, we're going to start with. So, a tech radar looks like something like this. We pretty much bulk those blips, those small things that we're going to discuss, into tools, techniques, platforms, languages, and frameworks. And for each and every one of those things, we say, hey, this is a hold. This is stuff that people should avoid doing. This is an assess. Things that you should start considering doing. You know, do some research. The other level is a trial. It's a good moment to start spiking with this. Some of your innovation time, etc. Do play around with the concept. Last but not least, an adopt. If your needs fit a certain set of criteria, this is a very good tool or process or technique for you. The way I like to explain the technology radar is by using another term. That's Gartner's hype life cycle, tech hype life cycle. And what that says is that every new technology, every new process, etc., tends to go through something like this, tends to go through a history like this. So it starts with a trigger. It starts getting trendy. Everybody thinks, you know, that's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then they realize, oh no, this thing won't cure cancer. So, oh, it's probably very bad. Everybody says it's shit, it goes way down. Oops, I shouldn't have said that, right? And then people realize, oh, it's not actually that bad. It's actually something that applies within this context. And then you reach what's called the plateau of productivity. What I think Gartner misses out, and probably because being a consulting company, they don't want to go into contentious things, is that eventually everything dies down. So a technology radar is a very powerful mechanism for engineering teams to align on where they think technology, processes, etc., are within this hype cycle. Creating one is very straightforward. Who here has ever run retros? It feels just like a retro. So what you do is you start and you share some context. In our case, this radar was created for you. We run our own. Hello. We run our own internal radars quite frequently, but they have lots of Atlassian-specific stuff that you know about. For this radar, we said, put yourselves in the shoes of our vendors and partners and think what sort of technology is very important for them. So that was the context setting. What you do next is you gather cards. You can do that in real life. You can do that in a virtual way. We're going to see a bit of that. Everybody goes and says, hey, I have this card here. It's a process. I think everybody should. Or I have this card here. It's a technique. And I think everybody should hold back on using this. We do all of that. Everybody puts their cards. We cluster them because there's going to be some colonels here and there. It's particularly fun when cards have different recommendations. That happens. And that entails a very interesting conversation. Any problem? The mic is breaking out a bit. It is? Okay. Hello, okay. Once you clustered your cards, what you do next is you vote. Hello? I can try and shout, I mean. No good? problems. Third time's a charm. Hello, hello, hello. Yeah, let's see how far this takes us. Then, where were we? Yeah, you cluster the cards. Then you do dot voting. That is very. Nope. Hello, hello. Not really doing what it should. I'll go speak without the mic until we get something. I'll probably lose my voice in halfway through, but let's see how that goes. Good, good. So yeah, perfect. Oh, you need to record it. Okay. Sorry. Which one do I use then? Right? No, at least it's fun for you guys. Yeah. Yeah. Hello, hello, hello. Okay, we good now? Yep, I hope so. All right, so context setting, you gather cards, you cluster your cards, you do dot voting. You're probably going to get way too many cards. And you want to drop some of those. So everybody gets a handful of votes, vote on the things that matter the most. Those are things that get discussed, just like any good retro. After that is done, you are done with the online sort of thing, in which everybody gets together. The person who's driving the radar, the person who's curating the radar then goes back to his or her cave and do what we call the creation of the themes. They get the cards, especially the most voted ones, say, hey, what are the major themes that I can extract from this thing? We're going to start with those, by the way. Then you do an internal presentation, then you do an external presentation. Folks, tech radars are a very powerful tool and something that you can run internally and that we highly recommend you do. We do that for our own purposes. This is what the radar that you're going to see next looked like. We were able to do that in person, mostly. And as a good agile company, I think we're measured by the amount of Postits that we use. You can see there was a lot of those. So these are the cards that we're going to see render in a nicer way in a couple of minutes. But if you want to do it in a fully distributed way, there's tools out there, such as better retros. Anything that allows you to do a retro, you can use for a tech radar. So with all that being said, let's have a look at our radar. Before we go into the details, I would like to tell you the 4 major themes that we identified. JavaScript is dead, long live JavaScript. It's been like 20 years that every once in a while someone goes and says, yeah, JavaScript is dying. Guess what? It's still live and kicking. So the ecosystem around JavaScript is very powerful, is very live. But on the other hand, what we're seeing is the rise of the transpile to JavaScript languages. We're going to talk a bit more about that as we go through the blips. Your apps at cloud scale. We talked a fair amount about that yesterday. So the cloud presents a lot of potential and brings new game rules. You saw a fair amount of that in the keynote yesterday. I swear that deck was prepared before the keynote. Cross-cutting is the new norm. What does that mean? We talked yesterday, for example, about 3LO and how we want those apps to be seamless, integrated, easy transitions. You saw that Gmail example. It is about convenience and being able to do things at the very place where things take action. So you're going to see lots of tools and techniques that allow very easy integration of tools, be it from a UX perspective or from a developer perspective. And beyond DevOps 1.0, you're going to see practices that we are suggesting and adopting that go beyond classic DevOps. It's still DevOps, but new things that you can do that can give a boost to your apps. All right, so let's go to the fun part. And I should have said that before. Folks, it's a lot of blips. I'll blast through them, which means that if you do not agree with one of those, if you would like more detail on one of those, if you think we missed some, please do reach out. It's a lot of them. This will be turned into a blog post, but right now, if you want more details, etc., please let us know. We may have time at the end of the talk, but corridor talks are even better. So let's go. Adopt in techniques. Oh, by the way, a very important tip. If you're building a radar, don't stress too much about whether a blip should be a technique, a process, or a tool. Don't care. That doesn't matter all that much. What matters is it an adopt, a hold, a trial, or an assess? So, things to adopt. Tech ops. For tech ops, we are going to, all those things we start, we're going to highlight in a couple of minutes. They get some special treatment. Contract testing. We're going to go into more details about this in a couple of minutes. Hammock-driven design. So this is actually a personal favorite from us at Ecosystem. This comes from a talk by Rich Hickey, the creator of Clojure, that proposes that take your time to design hard stuff. Because if you try and rush through the process, you will lose a lot of stuff. So don't make rush decisions on hard system designs. Semantic checks. Testing, automated testing that allows you to check behavior itself of your app, not so much whether this tiny detail here is working the way you want. I think I don't have to say much more about this one, right? Caching patterns. So we're releasing, iframe caching, but you can also do lots of things with caching. It's always a good thing. It allows you to have, not always a good thing, it allows you to have snapper response in many cases. Some things to be careful on occasion, but yeah, we highly recommend that you adopt and consider caching patterns. Change audit trail. What this means is keep a nice audit trail of all the code that you promote to production in the form of how you track your source, but also your deployments into production. That goes a long way towards troubleshooting and allowing you a very quick response time to problems. Security teams. We also talked a fair amount about security yesterday at the keynote, and security teams or security processes are very important, especially in the cloud world. Your ability to run it, yet another keynote mention from yesterday. It's very important. It relates quite closely to what we've called Beyond DevOps 1.0. Having a team that both owns the app, the development of the app, and also its maintenance goes a long way towards improving things. Things to trial. Are we not seeing that? Oh, yeah, static sites. Static sites or front-end generated code are stuff like SPAs that can be rendered from a CDN. So they still can have very dynamic behavior. So in the past, static sites meant, oh, I'm giving you this HTML that has static behavior. No, static sites these days means I'm giving you this bunch of assets that have very dynamic behavior by means of client-side scripting. So React stuff and stuff like that allows you to do static sites. One of the major advantages, you can deliver most of that stuff, for example, from CDN, which is another blip in the radar, and it allows you to drive down costs and get better response times. Things to assess. Voice interface. Those are the far out there things that to consider. Those are things that we are looking into and excited. So should your app, for example, integrate with Alexa? That could be a thing. So this is the assess thing. It's the sort of thing, hey, have a thought. It's the sort of thing that we are looking into and investing some time to investigate. The other one, and to me, this is more, should be a trial, but this was the vote of the group. Lighthouse Performance Profile. Lighthouse is this nice open source tool by Google that allows you to run an audit on your web pages. It gives you a very good, feedback on issues that your web pages may have. Many of those are focused on performance, so really good stuff to check how well your pages are behaving. Things to hold. WebDriver. Anyone here using Selenium WebDriver? I'm so sorry for you. I really am. I really am. If you aren't, if you didn't raise your hand, good for you. It's not like the sort of thing that WebDriver can do for you, which is testing user interactions is a bad thing, but there's much better tooling out there these days. So the highlights and techniques are tech ops and contract testing. So in a completely unscripted manner, anyone here from Atlassian who been doing tech ops for a while? Oh, okay. I got one guy here who I may or may not know. Your name is Francis, right? What can you tell us about tech ops, Francis? Don't you want to? Stand, man. Come on.
Hello? Can you hear me? Yep. Okay. Francis. So in my team, we have been doing a TechOps thing called TechOps Roll-Up. It's a weekly meeting where we gather the team and we look at the servicing metrics and monitoring data that we have, including incidents, low priority things. And we start to ask like hard questions about the service and why is this service behaving this way? And yeah, we take a look at like downstream services, how we can handle that better, and a bunch of different things that we don't see in a daily basis, like on daily work. So yeah, at this time, in this weekly meeting, we end up like talking about these things.
Good, thank you. Yeah, so, DevOps in action, taking the boundary further. Great, thanks. Contract testing. We've been doing a lot of that at Atlassian. We are, so the number one consumer of Atlassian services is Atlassian, and the way for us to survive this sort of thing is to implement lots of contract testing. Contract testing means you, as an API consumer, set up mocking services around your thing, around your app, so that you can run tests against it without depending on those dependencies to be always up and always available for the sort of stuff you need. You, as a provider, have contracts coming from clients saying, hey, these are my expectations, these are the contracts that I want you to fulfill, and you have that in your automated test suite as well, so that you know when you're breaking someone by introducing some contract change. Platforms. Adopt. Cloud hosting. We're going to go into more details on this one in a couple of minutes. Docker and Kubernetes. That's yet another highlight. We're going to have more time for that. 12-factor. We're very firm believers of 12-factor apps. Those practices have taken us a long way. We have a lot of architectural investment in that. So it's a good thing to do. Those are 12 patterns for apps to scale at the cloud level. Things to try. Serverless. We're going to go into that in a minute. Things to assess. WebAssembly. This is a very exciting thing, especially for us, and I guess for you. WebAssembly allows us to compile code from languages such as Rust, but doesn't have to be Rust, into this sort of JavaScript bytecode that's easily executable by the browser. It allows us to sandbox those things, so you can run the code a bit more safely. This is still in its infancy. It's very early, but it's one thing that we are looking into, and that may be, a big thing that you're going to hear us talking about a year or two from now. Service meshes. If you are doing microservice architectures, this is something to consider. It does simplify a lot of communication between services. The concept behind the service mesh is that you offload a lot of the concerns about service-to-service communication, things like authorization, authentication, service discovery, circuit breaking, etc., to a mesh. And that thing does all of that for you. If it sounds kind of magical, it's because it is. But if you're doing microservices, it is a good thing to consider. HTTP2, it's still in assess because, rolling out, not all vendors out there have support for this sort of thing, but it does introduce a number of interesting cases. I do expect that in a couple of years from now, we're going to be talking about how we're turning HTTP2 features into better ways for us to interact with you. And last but not least, you saw yesterday, Shree's map on our regions, etc. So multi-region deployments, it's something that we're calling it an assess because it's the sort of thing that you have to figure out for your own. Is that something that fits my needs or not? For us, yes, it's the sort of thing that we've been doing. Things to hold. I love that section. Right? Yeah. So, adopt. Cloud hosting. We talked a lot about that, but perhaps the most important thing about cloud hosting is that it's not just about scaling, as we talked a lot yesterday, but also that cloud providers are providing is a terrible way of putting it, but cloud providers are bringing us new features every quarter or so, and some of those things allow us to experiment with some very bleeding-edge technology at a very low cost. We're going to see, for example, blips about artificial intelligence. Some of the services that AWS has been providing these days makes it very easy for you to start experimenting with that. It was not a reality until those guys started getting to that space. Docker and Kubernetes. So containers are a thing. Docker is the format for containers. There's been a fair amount of wars in the air, but nobody made a dent in the amount of market adoption that Docker has. And if you're doing Docker, you want to manage your containers. That was the second big war, the container management war. That war is over. Kubernetes has won. You may use something else on top of that. Kubernetes itself is kind of dry, but if you are seriously doing Docker, please do consider using Kubernetes as well. And for serverless, do we have anyone here in the audience who's played around with serverless? Do we have anyone in the audience who ever gave a talk about serverless? Patrick, please. Oh, and by the way, this is a very good opportunity. Patrick and I, as you can see, are two different people.
Nice. Thanks, Diogo. Yeah, serverless, if you're interested, I gave a talk last year at Atlassian. So if you Google Atlassian 17 serverless, you should find the slides. I found serverless or functions essentially be a good way to start something low cost, low traffic. You can try out something. The serverless framework specifically also simplifies your workflow of deploying those functions, managing those functions. And I think they're a great fit for things like webhook handling or other event-driven applications. So yeah, I would definitely suggest checking out the talk and playing around with functions if you get a chance.
Good, good. Yeah, what he said. All right, tools. What are the things that we recommend everybody adopt? First, real-time monitoring. We've been doing a lot of that. Real and near-time monitoring. We're talking about monitor every single important aspect of your app. So Francis talked about tech ops. We use that monitoring, and we use those metrics, etc., in a recurring basis for meetings, but we also need to have very proactive response to incidents, to issues that we may be facing. So real-time monitoring, there's lots of good tools out there that allows you to address an issue before anyone else knows it's happening. Atlas Kit, kind of expected, right? So yeah, I guess you know about this. Let's move forward. Open API v3. For those who are not associating those things, this is Swagger, pretty much the API spec. So if you are providing an API, if it's a RESTful API, Swagger, or as it's called these days, Open API, the third version, is a very good way to not just document, but also specify a good contract around your API. That goes a long way towards allowing clients for our APIs to know what they can use. Bitbucket pipelines, I guess this is not a surprise, but we are very heavy consumers of that. We're very happy with that. So yeah, we feel quite comfortable recommending that. You saw the keynote, right? There is no way I would not mention this. So yeah. Trial. CDNs. Delivering content out of a CDN. Oh, but this is a highlight. I'll go into that in a couple of minutes. Sorry. Queuing and notification middleware. So we do push a fair amount of messages to you in the form of webhooks. Having some sort of queuing mechanism that receives that and allows you to simplify our architecture and even do stuff like back pressure, this sort of thing goes a long way. So please do consider using this sort of thing. We use that extensively at Atlassian. Things to assess. Machine learning. We at Atlassian are way past the assess thing. We're deep into adopt/trial. Trialing for some stuff, adopting for some other stuff. As I said before, we are now seeing lots of new features available at a very low cost. That was a highlight, I just realized, but so I'll jump it afterwards. So it's become cheap to actually play around, experiment with machine learning. So it's a very good moment for you to start seeing what sort of good thing that can bring to your apps. And Hode, Maven. We are a big Java shop at Atlassian, so we're not saying drop Java, nope. But we're saying, yeah, when we're doing builds, we prefer, for example, to do for JVM, we prefer to do that with Gradle. Chef, Ansible, and most of those platform automation tools. They were great at their time, but the reality is most of the stuff they did was actually challenged by Docker and the whole Docker ecosystem. So these days, we don't use much of those automation tools. We automate things by using Docker, Kubernetes, and other sets of tooling. So, real-time monitoring. Talked about this one already. CDNs. Delivering static assets out of a CDN allows you to have fast response times and reduce your costs quite significantly. So in case you're not doing CDNs yet, please do consider doing that. Machine learning, also spoke about this one. You see I got carried away. Languages and frameworks, and we're almost done, folks. Things to adopt. React. I guess this does not come as a surprise, right? TypeScript and Flow, those are highlights. We're going to talk about that in a couple of minutes. If you're doing React, you probably want to do Redux. There is a if in here, and I'll explain that in a minute. Redux is a framework. React is a library. It's just ways through which you can represent your components, right? But while Redux is a full-blown framework. So you don't want to do just React. You want something that allows you to hook all your components together. Redux is a good choice for especially clients of RESTful APIs. It just so happens that there's also a new set of frameworks out there that are worth checking out. Next one is Babel.js. So quite probably if you're doing React, if you're doing TypeScript, etc., you may be touching Babel. There was lots of people who thought that Babel was a fad, but it's been around for a fair amount of time. This is a transpiler, by the way, so it allows you to transpile code in multiple versions of JavaScript into something that is that allows you to run on pretty much any browser. Trial. Not surprised, right? So I am super excited with the announcement we did yesterday about GraphQL. We have been using GraphQL at Atlassian for 2 years, I would say. And we saw lots of benefit of doing so. We will have news for you regarding that in the next couple of months. And yes, we will release a GraphQL API. So it's a good moment to take some time and learn about that. If you are interested in that, yeah, please call me at the corridor. I'll bother you to death about GraphQL. If you're doing GraphQL, then you may not want to do Redux. You may want to do Relay or Apollo Client. Those things hook very easily to GraphQL and allow you to simplify a lot state management in your clients. You can delegate a lot to that, which in turn delegates a lot of that to your GraphQL APIs. Kotlin, we're very big on JVM, and many of our teams that are playing around, that are still building on the JVM, are experimenting with Kotlin with very good results. So if you're a Java shop, yeah, please consider using that. And things to assess. This one is a highlight. We're going to talk about that one. This one's a very contentious point, so it's going to be fun. And things to hold back. jQuery. Not surprised, right? Another one, too, is very heavy ORMs. So the days in which those magical ORMs will do everything for you are over, mostly because we've figured out that lightweight ORMs actually are a lot less intrusive. They allow you to have much more flexibility in your designs. They allow you to have more control over code, and especially if you're going towards a simpler architecture, perhaps based on microservices or something else, those heavyweight ORMs actually get in the way. So, highlights. Why don't we do a 2-for-1 around React and TypeScript? I like the idea because it's not my problem. Jamie, can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so our team has been using TypeScript for quite a while now, and we've loved it. I mean, really, all the arguments for TypeScript is the same as the arguments for most statically checked languages. You don't sort of have to wait until you're running a code and just like you see a blank browser window, like what broke? You just get a little squiggly red line under the code as soon as you type it. So it's just static typing. The type system is very powerful, and it just keeps getting improved in each release. And so you can express a lot of things about what is and what isn't valid parameters and arrangements and types. So yeah, there's very good support for types for all kinds of libraries out there. You can add your own quite easily. We've had a great experience. The only thing I can't talk to so much is incremental adoption in an existing JavaScript code base, but you can sort of gradually add more TypeScript and add more constraints if you want to try and migrate a code base. We have rewritten a few smaller libraries from JavaScript to TypeScript. Oh, and yeah, there's also really good React support as well.
Good, thanks. Yeah, and we mentioned Flow as well. This is a big debate going internally at Atlassian, the TypeScript/Flow conundrum. I'll spare you the details, but overall the perception is that TypeScript is more mature in terms of tooling around it. Flow, on the other hand, allows you for an easier transition from vanilla JavaScript into types. So it's worth checking out the two if you're interested in this and see which one better fits your needs. Talked about GraphQL already. We do believe that can simplify things a lot for you. So we are investing quite a lot in that. Last but not least, Oracle JDK / OpenJDK. Who here is aware of the JDK licensing conundrum that's happening right now? Yeah, we at Atlassian are painfully aware of that. For those who aren't, you're probably not on the JVM, but I'll say that anyway. Oracle has changed their licensing model for the JDK. On one side, on the upside, it means that you can get proper vendor support, proper Oracle support for that JVM. On the other side, that comes attached with a licensing model that is hard to understand and makes us, at least internally at Atlassian, a bit uncomfortable. So it is a very good moment for anyone running Java at this point to decide, hey, am I going to do Oracle JDK, OpenJDK, or something else? This is the time to evaluate that. And unfortunately, we cannot tell you which one to pick. You have to look into pros and cons for the options out there. It's important to say that there are licensed, supported alternatives to the Oracle JDK. All right, so wrapping up. We saw the major trends. Now that we saw the blips, we can go back to them. We talked a lot about TypeScript. We talked about React. We talked about lots of stuff that happened in the front end, and that all reinforced the point that JavaScript is here to stay. Perhaps in the shape of something that gets transpiled into, but that is still a major thing. Perhaps WebAssembly is going to change that in the near future. We don't know that yet, but yeah, JavaScript is a reality. It's strong, live and kicking. It's going to be like that for the next couple of years, we think. Your apps at cloud scale is a very important thing as well. It will allow cloud adoption will allow your apps to scale to cloud needs, but not just that. You do get benefits from new tooling that becomes available to you that would be very hard to build in-house. Cross-cutting is a new norm. Things like service mesh, things like OAuth 2, etc., allows us to have deeply integrated systems. The idea is that we want that integration to be as seamless as possible to our users, but also as easy to do as possible to our developers. So cross-cutting is a major trend happening right now. And we talked about new things, we talked about real-time monitoring, we talked about profiling, we talked about tech ops, etc. This is, to me, not a challenge to DevOps. This means that we are going beyond what originally we were thinking about when we set out in our DevOps journey. So, a couple more things. One last big thing to remember is that, as I said before, even an adopt is a sort of thing that you have to consider in your context. And your context is radically different from ours. So your mileage will vary. So what we suggest you do is take all of that advice with a grain of salt. Do reach out to us for the ones that you find the most interesting, and run your own tech radars. And if you do so, please do share those with us. Thank you so much, folks.